You first invested, the stock is up some 1,600%. Why did you first buy Tesla, and why not sell it now and lock in these gains, especially after Elon Musk is now worrying about the Cybertruck and the US consumer?
I met Elon in 2010. It took me 4 years of doing research before we ultimately decided to invest. And we invested between 2014 and 2016. We invested a total of approximately $400 million, $380 million. In 3 years is when we were buying the stock, and that was it. And the average price, and we've made about 20 times our money since then. We made at the peak, and we probably made about $5.5 billion in profits so far, and I think we'll make another 5 times in the next 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years. What made us buy it is that he is a mission-driven person. His idea was to try to convert the United States, the world, from using petrol to using electricity. I thought initially it was unlikely he'd be successful. That's when I met him in 2010. 2014, I had become convinced he would become successful. And we invested approximately 2% of our assets at that time, 2% of the $21 or $22 billion that we had under management. We now have about $41 billion. And of the $41 billion, $40 billion is profits that we made for our clients over the past, since 1992. So basically, we invested because I thought there was a big upside. I thought he was a brilliant guy. I still think that. We continue to work on our research in this company all the time. Virtually every week, we're talking to someone there. I was out in Palo Alto a week ago, and I was there for an afternoon, and I met with 2 executives who were the people who were in charge of autonomous driving and also in charge of compute, of what NVIDIA does, the chips. So what we're always doing, we're trying to understand how a business operates and what's special about it and why other people can't do the same thing. And in the case of Tesla, we are convinced that people cannot do what they're doing, and that ultimately it's not just going to be a car company, it's not just going to be a battery company, but ultimately all the other car companies, which 50 years ago elected to become much more profitable and outsource supplies and compute to other people, we're going to be like Intel was inside of computers. This is going to be Tesla inside of cars. All the cars are going to be using Tesla autonomous driving. No one else can possibly compete.
Of course, you haven't just invested in Tesla, Ron. I think your second biggest position is SpaceX. Why have you made such a large investment in a private company, and what are your expectations for it?
In the case of SpaceX, we invested in Tesla, as I said, between 2014 and 2016. We were working on SpaceX the whole period of time, and we began to invest in 2017. And from 2017 through present, we've invested about $700 million, and that $700 million is the current value of about $1.7 billion. And in the case of SpaceX, we think that over the next 3 years, it's likely that they will go public, and with Starlink, which is the internet for the planet. And we think that we're going to make a double in the company by then. We think that the business, which is now valued for $150 billion, we think at that time will be worth $250 to $300 billion. And we think that by 2030, it's likely they will be worth somewhere around $500 or $600 billion. And in the 2030s, that's when I expect to make another 10 times our money. So we could make, over the next 15 or 20 years, we can make 30 to 50 times our money in SpaceX. That's why we invested. And what he's doing, like in Tesla, we are having the leading company that makes electric cars, and that led to autonomous driving. And autonomous driving is something that ultimately we're going to be able to charge. Tesla will be able to charge $2,000, roughly $2,000, $2,500 a year at least, for the ability for this car to drive, by itself. And so we think that by this period of time, over say 7 or 8 years, over the next, Tesla can be doing 15 million cars a year, 20 million cars a year. And ultimately, they're going to have other, which will be a fifth or a quarter of all the cars that are made. But all the cars will have the use of the autonomous driving that Tesla is going to be providing to them. So it's going to be Tesla inside autonomous driving. In the case of space, what they're going to be doing there, the innovation that other people can't possibly do, is the fact that they are able to launch rockets and reuse them over and over and over again. So as a result of that, it costs other people to get to space $100 million, $200 million. It costs us a fraction of that amount. And when Starship launches, it's going to cost us a fraction again of that account. So basically, we can get our satellites to space for a very low cost, And we're going to have ultimately 30,000 satellites, circling the Earth, providing internet to every point on Earth. There was just an article in the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago that talks about how they're trying to get internet, a government program, government subsidized program, trying to get internet into the mountains in Nevada. And it costs $53,000 per house, which happens to be more than the houses are worth, because it costs $16,000 a mile to put wire in the ground. Instead of going to Tesla, where you have internet broadband from space, no one has seemed to be able to recognize this yet, broadband from space, and it ever costs you $500 a house. So $53,000 a house, $500 a house. It boggles the mind. It makes you understand how the government, how are we letting this country be managed that you're going to spend $53,000 instead of $500? Crazy. Anyway, we invested there because the opportunity, we think, is ultimately for $1.2 trillion of revenues annually. And we're going to probably get 40–50% of those revenues because we're going to be the backbone for the internet. And that means you have $400 or $500 billion of annualized revenues in 15 years, 20 years. And for that, you're going to be able to get 70 or 80% profit margin. The company pays value for $150 billion. So that's the satellite business. The other business is launching to space, where you're going to get transport ordnance around our planet, anywhere on the planet in 35 minutes, anywhere on the planet in 35 minutes. You're able to get to space to do research on space stations, to bring astronauts back and forth to space stations, to get to build a base on the moon and to get to Mars. So getting to Mars was the mission he had in mind, because he wanted to make sure that if something terrible happens on our planet, snuffed out. But once he had the ability to get a rocket you can use over and over again, now all of a sudden this business comes along where we can have satellite broadband. Satellite broadband comes from the mission to Mars. Autonomous driving comes from getting electric cars.
You've invested essentially not only in these two companies in a big way, but in one man. How do you account for that risk reward? There's something known as a key man risk. How do you think about that bet?
When I was in Palo Alto, they gave us access. Elon gave us access to meet with the head of compute and also with the head of autonomous driving, and for a half hour apiece. He doesn't want those people talking to investors. He wants them working in the business. And the compute person, his dad was an immigrant coming from Ireland, and he works in a kitchen, and he goes to school, and he becomes a brilliant computer guy. And he gets a job at Apple ultimately, and he runs the Apple business, the Apple Compute, very, very important business. And then he gets recruited to go to Tesla, and he's now 8 years at Tesla running that business. He says he has no turnover. Everyone there who works for him is wealthy, but there's all